It's a Track Stitch podcast sponsored by Tarot Cash, Business Casual or Town Gear. Tarot Cash has got you covered top to bottom. Up next, drama as the finalists for the World Athletics Athletes of the Year are announced. The New York City Marathon is in the bag, and so is the career on the roads of the great Eliud Kipchoge. We look back at a very interesting career from him and what was his biggest career regret. And we also have a mailbag question, all that and more. But first, you guys know the drill. It's the Track Stitch Band.
Champion, Riders bearing down on top of Ngugi. Ngugi digs deep and he's got no ball. And Andrew Lloyd wins the second.
Récupéré ensuite chez lui au Maroc à Ifrane.
On a la Web, il est parti à la Web, il a tenté le coup du siècle là.
Oui,
surprendre tout le monde. Au 800.
Final of the men's 10,000 meters in 19.
Stops the ball out. Oh, it looks to be. Who else is in the race? The wave is there. The confidence is there.
Okay, recording the podcast Saturday, November the 8th, Sunday, November the 9th at the Track Stitch Global Corporate Headquarters in Auckland, New Zealand. Shane Rohde. Good morning, Shane. How you doing?
You're good, mate. I had a little fan moment yesterday up at Tiare Links. I bumped into Harry Brook, the swashbuckling English cricketer who's in the hopes of his nation rest on his shoulders, and old Zach Crawley, the slightly struggling yet elegant opener that Warney was a big fan of. So that was a little fan moment. Had a little photo with them. So that was pretty cool. They were very nice, humble. No, not very nice, humble, normal. I saw Crawley hitting it on the range though, and he was hitting it frickin' miles. It's obviously very translatable golf and cricket, but yeah, he was hitting it like, I'm not going to put a distance on it, but it was enormous. It was like some of the pros I've seen up there. So that was pretty cool.
Meaty. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Anything else going on? How's the move into the new office? You've sourced some new office furniture.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I've had my pockets fleeced, but it's all right. It looks suave.
Hey, all right, let's get into the podcast. So, as I mentioned in the intro, we have got three real topics to touch on today. The World Athletics Athletes of the Year, Eliud Kipchoge, some interesting comments he made after New York City Marathon, and a mailbag question. And, the people said, hey, why don't you guys answer a mailbag question first? Do things around the other way. Be innovative in that sense. So we've listened, we are the people's podcast. So we're going to actually answer the mailbag question first, legit mailbag question. Not that the others weren't, but this one actually came in via text message instead of by a carrier pigeon like the other ones have. And you said, hey, let's discuss this one first. So should we get into it?
Yeah, and from Italy, no less, from the famed early 2000s track and triathlon specialist, Stephen Stavatini.
Yeah. All right. So the question is this one. As a former tri guy, I've been loving the work of Alex Yee in the running world. 13:13 for 5K, 61:29 for the half, and 2:11:08 for the marathon in London. My mate Rick is impressed, but also claims a lot has to do with super shoes. What do you guys reckon? How impressive are these times? Where should we start on this one?
Well, the baseline is some nerdy little digging I've been doing. So in 1992, that was pre the era where EPO really made its way into track and cycling. It was the 14th. It would have given him the 14th fastest time in the world.
Wow.
2008, it would have given him the 47th fastest time in the world, and in 2025, it's the 98th, approximately the 98th fastest time in the world. So that's a baseline to work from. Do I think it's impressive? I think it's really impressive because if you look at, we've got a strong history in triathlon in New Zealand with Hamish Carter winning the 2004 Olympics, Bevan Doherty silver, and Bevan Doherty particularly going on to be a mainstay in the top ranks of triathlon for many years thereafter and going into those half Ironmans and dominating those as well. I mean, so if you look at it and you extrapolate it out, for a triathlete to be running 13:13, and what do we say as well, Jason, before we came on air, that the 98th best time in 1992 was 13:34.9,
Yeah.
and in 2008 was 13:24.8.
Yeah.
So if a triathlete back in 92 or 2008 were able to run either 13:24 or 13:34 or 13:35, you would say that, in the context of what we knew of say track athletes back then, you'd say that it was wildly impressive given he's a multi-discipline athlete. So on the face of it, the start point is yes, I think it is very impressive.
Yeah, and I mean it's just sort of like a natural progression as well that like better athletes just in general were going to populate events like the triathlon, right? That you were going to get like athletes with better or higher competency in individual events, and kind of one that you can really make a difference on is in running. It really started with the Brownlee brothers, right? Remember those guys? They were particularly good runners that sort of crossed over as well. I mean, you mentioned like Carter and Doherty from a New Zealand point of view. Like, remember those guys running at the New Zealand champs? They would turn up and run like the 5K or the 10K, and they were, I think the 5K, they were sort of mid 14:30 to 14:40 guys, right?
I'm pretty sure Hamish has ran 14:35, and I remember
Right.
Doherty running like 14:40. They certainly didn't run low 14s. I know people thought in the know that when Hamish won the Olympics, he could have run closer to 14.
Yeah.
Sure, but then I'm sure that Alex Yee's coach probably thinks he can run 13 flat. The fact is he ran 14:35.
Yeah.
So it's a minute 20 slower. So yes, that tracks with that theory.
So, I mean, the question also involves this claim of super shoes, right? So we know that, yes, it is very impressive, but the question is like, is it really that impressive, or is a lot of it to do with the shoes? I mean, so I think we've sort of discussed this a little bit before on the podcast, and maybe some people were listening and like, who the fuck are these guys to be talking about this? Well, I mean, like my background is maybe not a lot of people know this, but I worked in the athletic footwear industry, specifically in like performance running, track and field for over a decade at Adidas. Very fortunate to have that job. And while I don't know everything about this topic, I was fortunate to be privy to, for example, a lot of lab test data, a lot of, material development data. I mean, I think I've got a pretty good grounding of this kind of on this particular topic. I think the simple answer is, especially on the roads, where, for example, a lot of Yee's running, obviously 13:13. By the way, was that on the track? It must have been, right?
I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
But definitely a 61:29 half and a 2:11 marathon were on the roads. I think absolutely the answer is on the roads. Like this new era of product has made a massive difference. It's not such a massive impact on the track for a number of other reasons, but we'll just talk about the road here. I think there's also even a difference between the impact it's had on like the actual specialist road runners and then also a triathlete. And the thing is that the number one kind of benefit for these products, and a lot of people made a big deal about carbon fiber plates and the spring effect and all this kind of stuff. It's not really that at all. It's really this ability to almost like cushion and protect athletes without any massive cost in weight or the amount of force that you can put into the ground. Because you hear a lot of the time about energy return and all this kind of stuff, energy return of carbon fiber plates and the foams. And the truth is it's not that at all, right? Like the carbon fiber plates don't bend in the way that would return energy that's helpful. And when you're talking about like the resiliency of a foam, I'm sorry if this is getting too geeky, just cut me off.
Interesting.
When you're talking about the resiliency of a foam, there's not really much energy that is returned by this spring constant of the foam, right? It comes down to Newton's second law. It's all about like the amount of force that you can put into the road surface. And so getting back to sort of why these products are so effective and why they would be especially effective for a triathlete is that like these triathletes are taking a lot of pounding on their body just in many different ways, right? And so if you can have a product that sort of allows them to be able to run with, it is very effective at sort of dampening all these micro vibrations and this pounding on the road, right? That's their biggest enemy because they're not as used to it as an elite runner is, right? Like a Eliud Kipchoge who's running, anywhere between 130 130 and 150 miles a week. Obviously, a triathlete doesn't have the time or the energy to be able to do that. So the pounding on the pavement, right, that constant pounding, which is such an energy cost, which is mitigated by these new products, is probably, I would hypothesize, going to create a slightly larger effect for a non-specialist runner than it does for a specialist runner, if that makes sense. So a guy like Yee, right, who, he can only spend so much time running, right? When he gets out there and tries to run, these elite times over these distances, right, he's going to find that slightly more difficult on his body than someone who's a specialist runner. And I think that's just stating the obvious. So I would say this. I don't think does it have a lot to do with super shoes? Yes, but the most important thing, and this is like the biggest fallacy I think there's been, at least in my opinion, from somebody who has been in the industry and around and inside the industry for a very long time, is that these products are only really helping athletes sort of achieve their ceiling performances. They're not additive in any way, right? These are not adding, they don't add energy to the equation. They don't increase the amount of force that a runner can put into the road, and hence the road returns back to them, which is the basis of their running speed. So yes, I think they're very helpful, but I think what's really happening is that they're just enabling more and more athletes to better showcase what their ultimate potential is. And so probably that's the situation that you've got with Alex Yee. So it's very impressive, even though the shoes matter.
I was watching the world champs with my partner, and she's a doctor, and I was explaining to her Georgia Hunter Bell, who was a top 800 meter runner as a junior, went to the States. She said she was too immature and all that, got caught up in, being effectively a kid. Then went away, got a job, and became world duathlon champion, and was an incredible duathlete for many years, which meant she's done a lot of cross training. Came back, won Olympic bronze in the 1500, and then almost won the world champs in the 800 last year.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to Rose that there's a theory that from running, you destroy a lot of blood cells from heel strike. I think it's called hemolysis or something like that. And she said, well, that doesn't sound right, because she's much smarter than guys like you or me, particularly when it comes to medicine. And so she went and looked it up in like journal access, whatever she has access to as a doctor. And she said, you actually did right. Like, there's studies that show that it's the heel strike. And I remember for me, the very mediocre level I achieved in my life, my lifetime of running, is that the best year I had was when I actually got a stress fracture in my femur, and I did a huge amount of pool running and cycling. And I had my best ever summer. And looking back, the way Georgia Hunter Bell trains, the way a lot of athletes train these days, is to get the aerobic or the bioenergetic engine stimulated in a way with the least possible cost. Now, the shoe tech, as you're just explaining in great detail, which was awesome, obviously is a function of the same thing. It's like, how much aerobic volume can you get in? And of course, the shoes help in the sense that the more specific the aerobic conditioning to the actual action, which is running here, or elite level running, with something closely, with an action is closely approximating your actual event, which is elite running, the better. So if the shoes allow you to do more of that aerobic conditioning, mimicking the actual action that you're proficient in, then of course that has to be better. So to me, it makes total sense. And it's no different to the fallacy that people have around doping. People who think that you take a drug and you're this wonder athlete. No, the drugs allow you to stress plus rest equals adaptation. So to stress more and adapt better. So everything you're saying tracks perfectly, and we can say all that, but that doesn't detract in any way from Alex Yee and the superb quality of his performances. Watching him in that Olympic, I don't watch triathlon; it's not my jam.
Yeah.
But watching him and Hayden Wilde, New Zealand's own Hayden Wilde, in that Olympic triathlon was wicked. It was one of my favourite moments of the Olympics for any sport, any nation. And Hayden Wilde, I've always followed him because he's incredible and he looks like an awesome dude. He is a great runner. Like, I went and watched him run at that when he tried to do that.
He's
20K on the.
also
He's
low 13:30.
yeah 13. I looked him up
Even
for
faster,
13:20, 13:24. I found, but I thought
Crazy.
I remember him running even quicker. So he's awesome. He's a lot better. No disrespect to Hamish Carter and Bevan Doherty, but he's a way better runner than those
Yeah.
guys were.
Yeah.
And the way Yee, who was on the ropes, ran him down, like his mechanics, he looked like a top track athlete. The way he hung in there, and then his running form is, unfortunately for Hayden, a little bit better in terms of he's mechanically a bit better than Wild's like your sort of old sort of cart horse, like aerobic beast. He just is a strong man, whereas Yee has also got that elasticity in his stride, and unfortunately for Hayden, ran him down. But both of them, incredibly, they're awesome runners, both of them.
I think we've spoken about this, just you and I, occasionally before. I look back on my career and I think this is a really interesting little piece of information. I look back on my career and I had two very distinct, I guess you'd say, like, different. I wouldn't say it was a real difference in philosophy of training, but when I was much younger and I was coming up through the ranks, right, I did all my training on grass, right? Mariwa Park and Napier. Shout out Mariwa Park. Very little, because it was close to home. That's what my club was, etc., etc. And then I didn't have time to be going to the Nelson Park Hastings to run on the track. And then one thing that I realized is when I went to just looking back in hindsight, just reflecting, as I got more serious with running and was running somewhat professionally or semi-professionally, I changed that because just of my environment, and I was doing a lot more work on the track. And what actually happened, I believe, is over a period of years, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, I feel just like the repetitive, impacting on that track at high intensity, just slowly, without me even realizing it, just detracted from my strength.
Aerobic.
Yeah, exactly. It's just I didn't have that same pop and freshness. I very rarely ran poorly as a high school athlete, even relative. I wasn't running as fast, but just my feeling, like, relative to my level, I never ran poorly. And I realized that I had more fluctuations as a pro. And I just did, in hindsight, far too much work on the track. And I in like spikes or low profile like training shoes. And my best seasons were when I as well had injury issues. I think like 2004 and 2005, I both had some issues that forced me to do a little bit more work. This was when I was living in Germany, training in the forest, doing stuff obviously in trainers. And man, it's just like such a it's just so interesting to look back on the things that you learn. And so what I've realized is one of the massive sort of things we don't think about is protection of muscles on like a microscopic level. Exactly what you were talking about with Rose, this concept of just like every time you pound into the pavement, it doesn't even matter if you feel like it's smooth or not. These micro impacts are causing damage for you. And if you can mitigate them as effectively as possible, right, you're of course going to recover better, and like your aerobic system, which isn't tied in necessarily to like your muscles on a microscopic level, right, that will continue to evolve on its own. So that's where like these new products and their ability to cushion and just even out, and just even if think about if you're reducing like these micro vibrations, these micro impacts, and what their detrimental impact on your muscles are on like a cellular level, if you're even reducing that by say 15 to 20% over the course of a season, that is going to add up to something very positive for you. And like to round out my little precautionary tale, I just wish I could have gone back, and I would, if I could do it again, I just would almost do no workouts on the track and spikes. Now, of course, these days the spikes have a lot more cushion in them, so you can do that. That's one of the big advantages when we're talking track running. But for me, back in that era, the early 2000s, we didn't have access to that. I just would have just been running in flats. I got a good story about Nico Mochibon, actually. So obviously, Nico Mochibon, Olympic finalist in 1996. He ran 1:43.8 in that crazy Olympic final. So I knew Nico quite well because he was with the same management group as me, or I was with the same management group as him back in the early 2000s, and he was training in Sindelfingen in Germany, and that's where I was staying for a while. And I remember Nico coming down to the track, even at an advanced stage in his career, and running, I think he ran 2 400s in like 49 1, 49 2. And these pair of massive chunky Adidas, like, you know, they look like cross training shoes, not even like, they weren't even racing flats. That's the point. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, if he'd worn spikes, he could have gone so much quicker. And I wasn't that I thought Nico was stupid for doing that, but I just was like, oh, why wouldn't you want to, you know, lace up the spikes and go run 48? And it's like all these little things now that I think about, I'm like, man, he was just far more clued in than I certainly was. I just never really clicked in time.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Wow.
yeah, interesting stuff. So yeah, I mean, Rick claims it's got a lot to do with the shoes. Rick's not necessarily wrong, but again, don't make the mistake in thinking that these products are turning athletes into, you know, performers that they're not. Like, this is not the same as the D word.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that if you equalize for the shoes, which is what we both obviously attempted to do there.
Yeah.
If you equalize for the shoes, Yee is a superb runner, and he would be a superb runner in any era relative to the top runners. He's a legit.
Yeah.
You can't, you know, I watched, and I obviously love running. That's why we're doing this podcast, and I've watched him run his mechanics, and he's incredible. So I would never sit there argue with anyone that he's not a truly elite runner. He's awesome.
Yeah. So there you go, Steve. That is the answer. How impressive are these times? Still very impressive. All right. Next topic. All right.
What you got?
Okay. World drama. Controversy. World Athletics Athlete of the Year finalists are announced. We talked about this before we came on air, because it doesn't really matter that much, does it? Like, these are all just, I mean, I think they even took away the cash prize for these awards. I think at one point, Athlete of the Year got $100,000, which is definitely something. They took away that. So the question is, like, what do these awards really mean? But a little bit of controversy as the finalists were announced last week, not so much on the men's side. The two finalists for the Track Athlete of the Year, Emmanuel Wanyonyi. I mean, that's pretty, I think that's quite fair when I'm looking across all the other, you know, distances and athletes. And Noah Lyles. Not a lot really happened on the track this year on the men's side in terms of, you know, record-breaking performances, you know, earth-shattering performances. I think one of the reasons was that Jakob out injured for the entire year. So that's a bit of a meh. But on the women's side, definite controversy, Shane, as Femke Bol, one of your favorites, one of my favorites too. She's great. But she was announced as a finalist alongside Sydney McLaughlin-Navarone. They only have two finalists, and it was at the expense of Beatrice Gibet, Faith Kipyegon, and Melissa Jefferson-Wooden. Now, a lot of podcasts have already discussed in depth, like, why, or just more like how this is ridiculous. They've gone through the details. We don't need to really rehash them too much here. The point is that I think they're right? Femke Bol did not, almost in any metric, have better seasons than those other three athletes. So I thought I would pose the question as why, why was this decision made by this selection committee? And this is kind of interesting. What they do is that they have, I looked into how they decide these finalists, right? And what they do is they do 50% of the vote is decided by the World Athletics Council, which is 27 people headed by Sebastian Coe. It's 26 or 27 headed by Coe. 25% of the vote decided by the World Athletics family, whatever that means, or who that is specifically. And then 25% of the vote were fans on social media, because of course we have to, for some reason, throw everything out to fans on social media. But I was also thinking, like, how on earth do you weigh the relative, you know, the votes on that side, right? It just seems bizarre to me. Like, for example, I saw that Femke had about 20,000 fan votes. Well, clearly that doesn't count the same as one vote on the World Athletics Council, right? So somehow they've got, you know, I don't know. Anyway, do you have a theory? And hold on, I'm going to put on my conspiracy theory glasses here. Right. That looks good. Do you have a theory on why Femke Bol was selected as a finalist in the face
Well,
of?
I'm gonna zoom out and have a fire up, an old fashioned fire up, or
Do it.
yeah, I am. I think it's a crock of shit, and I'll tell you why. I was just trying to find, as you were going through that wonderful little soliloquy there, I was just trying to find the exact quote. But Robbie Johnson, who we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, famed New Zealand double Olympian, gave me a fabulous book. And if anyone out there is a true track nerd and they haven't read this, they need to. It's a book called Once a Runner by John L. Parker Jr. And it's like a tomb if you want to be a track nerd like us. I don't recommend it, but if you love your running, you're a young man or woman, or for that matter, an old man or woman, and you love your running, you got to read this book. It starts off with he's like locked in the cabin, and it's kind of an ode to times gone by, the 100 miles a week, and the sort of solitude and the me against the world, and and the real theme of it at the beginning is, and it's so true. It's running is effectively a loner's sport. And it is a sport in which, if it's black and white, you win, you're the best. You lose, you're the you're the first loser, even if you're second. And it's got that old school fight or flight, and it's got this metric that no one can detract from. To then bring something which is entirely subjective, and it appears from what you're telling me highly political, is just such a turn off to me, to the extent that I kind of glaze over when I see any of this. I think it's nonsense. That's best spent in maybe like US politics or the NBA or sports, where everyone can argue who the GOAT is from, how many games over 31.5 points did Michael Jordan have from 30 to 40, all this kind of subjective nonsense. Well, no, it's not nonsense, but it's subjective. Right. Here it's like, who is the best? Femke Bol is nowhere near the best athlete in the world in 2025. She won in a pretty weak event without its queen, who went and won the 400 flat, and she objectively just isn't even in the conversation as the best.
I don't know how. Like it's so crazy. It's
so obviously political.
Yes,
it's so obviously. I feel it's so far above the threshold of of
plausibility.
Feasibility. But also objectively, how do I put this? Incontrovertibly, it's incontrovertible. It's uncontroversial or uncontrovertible opinion that she's not the best female athlete in the world this year,
or not even in the top two. Because that's
no, she's not. She's not. It's ridiculous. If she'd run close to Sydney's world record. She'd broken Sydney's world record, absolutely. Oh, but just to make the point of how strongly I feel about, I don't really care, but how exasperated I am at the thought of her being announced as the number one athlete in the world. Sydney almost broke the 400 world record, which is a known to be drug aided 30 plus year world record, 40 plus year world record, in the flat event, which has always attracted the best athletes vis-a-vis the hurdles, which has historically been weaker and still is on the women's side. So I just, so even if she had got close to or broken the world record on the hurdles, I'd still say I think SML's better for the 47, what was it? 47?
7.9.
47.79. So that, and then so she runs. What did she run? Like 52 something? I mean,
don't know. Maybe just under 52. But I mean, it's the fact that some, you can make the case. I'm fine that Sydney McLaughlin is there because that's a great performance. But it's like, again, this has been discussed, I'm sure, on many of the other great track and field podcasts. We love them all. We're all one big family out there. But Beatrice Chebet, 5,000 meter world record.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a world record plus a double at the world champs.
The 5 and 10. Yeah.
Yes, Kipchoge, the 1,500 meter world record plus wins her historic fourth global fourth world championships title, which matches LG, right?
And Beatrice Chebet as well. Let's not forget. I mean, she's light years ahead in the 10, but in the 5, she had to beat two women who have recently held the women's 5,000 world record in in an actual race. It wasn't like a procession at all. And Faith Kipchoge on the world record holder in the 1500 over a championship 5,000 and out sprint her.
Yeah, well,
I
don't
mean-
forget this one too. Kipchoge ran 8:07 for 3,000 meters this year too, which is
And
like,
Chibet's beating her as a more distance oriented 5:10 runner.
Yeah.
She's kicking down on her.
Yeah,
I mean that. Like, let's just yeah.
Well, and here's the other one. I think the person that honestly should be there, even ahead of Chibet and ahead of Kipchoge, is Melissa Jefferson-Wooden.
Jefferson-Wooden. Yeah.
I mean, that's absurd. So she was unbeaten over 100 this year. She lost only 2 races over 200. That was in Grand Slam track in April, May, when it's doubtful she really cared that much. But here's some interesting stats from her season, right? She ran the 4th fastest time ever in the 100 meters, right? Legal.
Yep.
3 times inside the world top 20 performances. Like, so when you look at, this is just not by a singular athlete. This is like multiple performances from like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, from Flojo, from Elaine Thompson-Herah. She ran 3 times, and the only person that's ever done or bettered that is Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, who's universally regarded as the greatest female sprinter of all time and on the par with Bolt, right? And the other thing too is like this 100-200 double. We mentioned it back on the Tokyo podcast for all the fans that tuned in for that one on the video review of the great events. Katrin Krabbe, I think we ranked that performance, I think, as our 8th best moment from Tokyo, the 100-200 double. That's only been done one other time. So Katrin Krabbe did it, and then Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price did it, and Melissa Jefferson-Wooden was only the 3rd woman ever to do the 100-200 double at the World Champs. So it's just so absurd that, but again, everyone else has pointed that out. Do you want to hear my theory on why Bowl got through the final 2? If I look at sort of these, and these are just the track athletes, right? So what they do is they do men's track, they do women's track, and then they do the field separate, and then they have a voting, a vote off to narrow down to the athletes of the year. If you look on the men's side, Emmanuel Wanyonyi, Kenya, right? So from African continent, and then you've got Noah Lyles, obviously American, from the American continent. On the women's side, you've got Sydney McLaughlin-Arone from the American continent, and if you put Melissa Jefferson-Wooden there, well, that's obviously another American
in Europe
candidate. Yes, like they just, I mean, Europe is still we know and we agree it's the beating heart of world track and field, and I think they were just like, we need to have a European candidate on here just for. I mean, I'm not going to make this a big political diversity thing, but I think they were just like, we need to have
and she's for all of our viewers out there, don't what's the word for it, don't confuse us saying this with us being not fans of Finca Bowl. She's incredibly likable. She's probably seems a bit too nice as a person to be a great champion, and that's what makes her so lovable. The images with her parents, like after that, she's a very relatable, normal kind of nice person who just happens to be a great talent on the track. So I love watching her race. Always rooting for her against Sydney because it'll be fun if she got closer. Don't think that's going to happen. Well, it's certainly not going to happen now. No, so it's not an anti-Femke Bol thing. Totally. But conflate is the word I was looking for. Anyone's interested, don't conflate the two because they're separate issues. But she's just, you have to call it as you see it on the People's Podcast, and she's just not. She's not in that echelon, unfortunately.
It's the only logical explanation I have is that they wanted to have someone from an athlete from Europe in the track finalists, because otherwise you would have had, either on the women's side you would have had 2 American finalists, or you would have had an American and an African finalist would have matched on the men's side, and I don't want to, and again, it doesn't really matter because, like you said, these awards at the end of the day are just kind of.
Gives a shit about them anyway. Anyone that loves track is not interested. Oh, that person was the such and such finalist, or you watch the track.
It does kind of suck though. You want to feel like you're, if you're Melissa Jefferson-Wooden, you want to feel like your historic season sort of was recognized. I think scheme, right?
Melissa Jefferson-Wooden is probably doing just fine. I saw a great thing on the internet on the drive here. Actually, it was talking about, it was Shaq, and he played a game, one of his early games against the Knicks, and Patrick Ewing was playing, and apparently he sucked. And his uncle, who was like this Navy or military guy, said, "Oh, you know, what was the problem?" And he's like, he said, I felt a lot of pressure. Was it stress about playing Patrick Ewing? And he said, yeah, it was. He goes, I'll pick you up at 7 a.m. in the morning. And he went and picked him up, and he took him to this place where this homeless family were, like on the berm of a house or whatever, and said, look, he goes, you think you feel pressure? He goes, these guys feel pressure. These guys can't put food in their mouth. And he reckons it like taught him this lifelong salutary lesson about real pressure is. And he goes, and after that moment, I never felt, he said, apparently, because he's got a history of helping a lot of people out. Maybe that's where it comes from. He said, that's playing basketball. He goes, you've got everything. That's not pressure. This is pressure. So I think Melissa Jefferson would be fine without a little award, to use Ricky Gervais's term from that infamous speech he gave at the Golden Globes or the Emmys or whatever it was. Yeah, the Grammys. Yeah. I said she'll be all right.
Okay. Enough of that one. Onwards and upwards. This next little segment, I think, is a really interesting one to discuss for a number of reasons. Eliud Kipchoge ends his career in New York. I mean, he's almost unequivocally the greatest marathon runner of all time. 2 times.
He is unequivocally the greatest.
11 major championship or major marathon wins. Ran multiple world records. Doesn't hold the world record anymore. But he was also the face of breaking 2, which he did incredibly.
I'll have to try and find it, and maybe I can link it the next podcast. But there's an incredible study written by an exercise physiologist around, I'm going to say 2010 or 12, about how difficult it was. The question was, why can the elites in the marathon not replicate the repeatable nature of victories of, say, the 1500 or the 5 and 10,000? And they gave some really scientific reasons as to just how much variability there is over an event that long, and all the physiological aspects that go into not only performing at that level over an event that's long, but also how close to the wind you sail in terms of your body, and how it makes it practically impossible to win multiple marathons. And this guy came out, and he gets second in his first ever marathon in 2004, and he, for a long time, until his kind of effective swan song tour, which has been a bit prolonged, not a bit prolonged, but it's been prolonged for a year, 18 months now. He's basically guaranteed. I've got a friend who's he's a professional gambler. He now lives in the Caymans or something like that. And I used to tell him about him. And then he reckons for about the next 10 years, from 2015 or 13 or 15, whenever he started running marathons, he would bet on him every time. And then when he got 7th, or the first time he flopped, when it started, the veneer started to crack a little bit, he texts me, and he's a good-natured guy, and he goes, mate, I kept doubling down on him. He goes, why didn't you tell me he'd gone to shit? And I said, mate, I didn't think you'd still be punting on him. That's 6 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's as predicted on the podcast by especially you were completely nonplussed about Bekele running, because you were like, but he's going to pull out of DNF, which is exactly what he did. But Kipchoge carried on. He runs 2:14 in his final marathon. But what's really interesting, though, is his comments after. And did you hear these comments about his
I did. I read them on
career regret? Interesting, right? So his biggest career regret was not breaking, or at least going for, or trying to break the world 5,000 meter record. And I thought that was really interesting on a couple of levels that we could talk about. Number one, do we actually think he was ever like a legit candidate to do it? And then there's another element too, which involves a distance that is in between basically the 5,000 meters and the marathon competitively, that for some reason he seemed perfectly suited to, but never actually really appeared to have any interest in going after. So we'll do the first one first, right? Could he, like, what were his legit, chances of getting that 5,000 meter world record? And I've got a few little numbers here that contribute, that sort of will help us here. So he ended up running 12:46 for 5K, which is obviously an incredible performance. And I think when he did that, it must have been easily inside the world top 10 at the time. He was a 3:33 1500 meter runner, which was actually faster than I thought, right? And he ran 7:27 for 3,000 meters. And when you look at that compared to the likes of Coman, Gibb, and Bekele, he wasn't quite at their level because, obviously Coman was incredibly fast over 1500, sub 330 performer. Bekele ran 332, but he also ran 725 over 3K, and Gibb was a 331 indoor guy plus also 725. So it does appear though that Eliud had, maybe a slight endurance edge given what we saw him do over the marathon. But was he ever like a legit threat to get that 5K world record?
Well, he won that 2003 5,000 World Championship primarily because Algarouge and Bekele got caught up and obsessed with marking each other, and they kind of forgot about him. And having said that, he was still a 12:46 guy. It's not like any, chump can turn up and beat Bekele and Algarouge, so that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a particularly, whether they were 12:52, which at the time was the fastest ever.
Still
5,000. It still is.
Still is. Major championship record.
Is it? Oh, okay. That's which is incredible.
Tell me what the other one was.
No, I was just racking my little computer.
I'm going to be there soon, mate. Is this a bet?
No, I think you're right.
No, I'm right.
So but it wasn't. I don't remember it being. I got a good memory of these a mad kick down. So it wasn't like a real and it was fast.
It was an endurance fest, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like those two guys. I just don't think either the other two, Bekele and LG, acquitted themselves perfectly in that race. So I think, and he was there or thereabouts. He never, other than that race though, he never really suggested to me he was knocking on the door of the level of those guys over the 5. And if you want good evidence of that, go and rewatch the 2008 Olympic 5,000 final. And Bekele blew his doors off in a way that made me thought that his real level was about what it is on paper. 12:37 versus 12:46. That would be what I expect a guy who's 10 seconds, which at that pace is what, like 70 meters, 60 meters, 65 meters. At that pace, he didn't just beat him, like they were there both sort of a similar ilk, and he put pressure on him, and then a bit like the way that Gibb would beat Turgat, where he would put pressure on him, and then remember Turgat used to do the big catch up the last 100 when Gibb had kind of got away, but they were only just separated, and Gibb had to fight to beat him. And then in Sydney, of course, he only just beat him because Gibb had been injured, but he blew his doors off like he was kind of more of a journeyman type pro, and I just think that is the most. I think in my head when you first said it, I was like, yeah, I mean, why not? He was thereabouts. He beat him in a world champs. He was a silver medalist, but no, I just don't think so. I think he could have run 12:41, 12:40, 12:42.
Yeah,
which is amazing, but I just don't think. Yeah.
So here's a really interesting little footnote to this, and do you know what's great about this about doing this podcast? We were a little bit whimsical a couple of weeks ago about it. A lot of people ask me, they're like, Jason, why do you do this podcast when only 27 people watch it? I'm like, it's not really the point. The point is that in doing this podcast, you learn and you continue to learn so much about even the sport that we profess to, know quite a lot about. And you just learn more and more stuff. And there's a couple of really awesome things I learned in researching this one. The first one is that when he ran his 3:33 1500 meter PR, it was on the exact same day that Bekele broke that world record in Hengelo.
Is that right?
Isn't that crazy? Yes, exactly. And I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I wonder if Kipchoge wanted to run the 5K there against Bekele, because why wouldn't you? I mean, you've just beaten him at the world champs a year before, and this was when he was much younger and clearly in his prime. And I wonder if I might try and do some digging with some guys that I know, some old agent friends, and find out if there was a bit of a kibosh put on him, because this seems like a very Jos Herman-esque move to say, no, Bekele just wants to go after the 5K. He doesn't want to have to worry about racing, which I guess in a way is fair. But I wonder if he really wanted to run the 5K that day, because it just seems odd that he'd run a 1500, but that happened on the same day. I feel like I agree with you. I don't know if he could have run the world record, but he was definitely a candidate to, in a really good race, maybe run. I think for me, 12:40 is like a really good like barrier or like inflection point. I feel like on a really good day, he may have been able to just sneak under 12:40, but more likely was going to be sort of in that 12:40 to 12:41 bracket. I definitely,
And
and certainly when Bekele ran 12:37, there was no way he had the ability to run.
you can see how he's got that sentiment because he's just spent the last decade becoming the greatest human ever in the marathon, across men or women, and I think I can say that uncontroversially. He's unbelievable what he's done. So I think then you start. It's unfair to say believing your own hype because it's justified, but I think that could then creep into thinking, oh shit, why didn't I go for that 5K world record? But if you forget for a moment the fact he was so dominant in the marathon and you just look at his 5,000 career, there weren't even really that many heralded attempts that say, and I guess that's what he's saying, that he didn't go, but he never like came across as someone. I wouldn't say he was an also ran. That's not fair. He was a world champion in 2003, but after that point, he was never a guy that you'd watch in a race with a bunch of rabbits go, this guy could have a crack here. Like he just, like you said, he was way off over 3. It just didn't strike me as, he never ran with that kind of purpose.
No, and I think to get that record too, you have to be like it's similar with the 1500. It's similar with the 800. It's similar with all the records now. You have to be a charger. Like you have to have that mindset. This is why when people say, oh, will Cole Hocker ever break the world record or Niels Laros? I'm like, I've got to see those guys do what like Nagus did in the Prefontaine Mile this year, which is you have got to be fearless and commit to the pace and go hard from the front. You cannot just be sifting around midfield and then unleashing these big kicks to beat guys. And I don't know if Kipchoge ever had that in him over those distances.
I mean, if you look at Coleman, you look at Mo Farah is another good example. All these guys who are dominant in an event often were truly world class in an event which was considerably shorter than their main event.
Yeah.
Case in point, Coleman 346 miler, 720, and 12:39 world record. You look at Kipchoge, that's also true, except it appears that his under-distance event was the 5,000, and then you've got a low to mid 1240s guy, potentially a 1240, 1241 guy who was not past his speed, because Ronaldo Canova used to always say that the problem with a lot of these guys who could run near or world record level for 5 and 10, they only historically used to go to the marathon when they were busted out on the track. But now, because there's so much more money on the roads, these guys are going, these young Africans in particular, at a really young age. So he was using like a kind of, he had enough anaerobic/aerobic threshold at, say, being a 1240 guy, yet he wasn't past it. And then he was able to extend out that resistance at those, at that intensity to the marathon. And he always ran the same way Bekele ran in the 5,000 when he ran 12:37. They looked like they were well within their limit running at or around world record pace. And it wasn't true for Kipchoge at the 5, but man, was it true at the marathon. You know, when he was running, he was imperious when he'd run those records, and he would look like he was, you know, the slightly paddly like arms. He would just look like running with even the paces. He looked in total control.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible to watch. Didn't apply in the 5,000. That's my take on it.
So he, in saying that though, he is one of the great 5,000 meter runners, right? He's a world champion over the distance. He beat, 2 Olympic champions.
Yes.
For all intents and purposes in their prime, certainly El Rouge, right? And then Bekele ran the world record a year later. So he's one of the greats. Did you know that he ran in every global final over 5,000 meters from 2003
to 2012?
No, not 012. 11 was his last one. So
because he didn't make the Kenyan team, and that's what made him go for the that's what made him go for the marathon.
He tried to make the team in the 10K, which we still have to talk about after this. But isn't that crazy? And so can you actually name it? This is a good trivia one for you. Do you know the places that he made in the course of, how many was it here? 7 straight global finals. Can you name them?
03 was Paris,
Yep.
right?
So the win.
04 was Athens.
Yes. So that was a bronze.
05 Helsinki.
Yeah. And I think that was a 4th place.
Okay. 07 was Osaka. 08
5th.
Beijing.
Yep. 2nd.
Yeah. 09 Berlin.
5th.
And 2011, or what's it? Berlin, 2011. Where was that? South Korea. Okay.
Daegu.
Yeah.
And he was
Daegu.
7th. So he 7 straight finals over 5K. So that's something that Bekele never did, because remember, Bekele, after he lost in 2004, lost a little bit of a confidence, and he only ran the 10K at the World Champs in 05 and 2007. So that's something I didn't know, that Kipchoge was present for all of those finals. Now, so here's the big question, which is really interesting. After 2008, he gets silver behind Bekele, right? And then in 2009, he finishes 5th in the final, won by Bekele, and then he's 7th in 2011. The question is, for me, that makes him such an interesting character, is where is this transitional move to the 10K, and why does he not do that? Because, like, it's just such a natural progression, right, for him. And maybe in the event that he just finished his career in 2011 running the 5K and didn't have this marathon career, you could probably look back and just say, hey, here's a guy that was just a pure 5,000 meter runner. He didn't, like running any other distance. But when you look at all the great 5,000 meter runners of all time, they're almost always dual athletes on one side of the spectrum. So you've got Jakob, right? 1,500 5K. You've got Seda Wita, 1,500 5K. You've got Komen, 1,500 mile 3K, 5K. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got the 5'10" guys, right? So you've got, Bekele, obviously. You've got Cheptegei, current world record holder. You've got Geb. And when you look at like Kipchoge's pedigree over the marathon, so he's obviously got incredible aerobic chops, because within 2 years of retiring, like you said, his first marathon was actually 2:05.
Yeah, I remember being shocked when he first came to prominence in the marathon, because I remember thinking I never knew he was like an up distance guy, because he outsprinted those quick guys over the 3K, 5K at the World Champs in 03. I was like, that's odd. Like, he's that good in the marathon. He's a 1,500. Because back in the day, running 3:33 when you're a legit 5K specialist you're a gun. Like, it's not like now where every bloody pro and his dog can run 3:33.
Totally.
3:33 back then. I remember in our own Nick Willis ran 3:32 in Rome in 2004. I was down at North Island cross country camps, and that was like
mind blowing.
That was a wild time to run. So he was a legit 15 5K guy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so crazy. I mean, like, if he hadn't made this move to the marathon, right, we would never be asking this question of why did he never target the 10K? And what's interesting is when he made these comments about his regret of not getting the 5,000 meter world record or going for it, he mentioned that he regretted not also getting the 10,000 meter road world record. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, why did you not want to run on the track? Because he seems, once again, like Occam's razor, the perfect candidate to want to do that. And when you look at 2000, in particular 09 and 2011, so Bekele still does the double. It's his last double in 2009, right? He wins the 5 and the 10. Kipchoge may not have beaten Bekele in that, but I feel like he certainly had the potential ability to finish better than 5th.
Where did he get in that Berlin race? 3rd? 4th?
Who? Kipchoge. No, he's 5th.
5th.
Yep. And then in 2011, he was 7th. But do you know who won the 10K in 2011? If you get this one, I would be extremely impressed, because
I'll tell you who won that. It was Julian from Ethiopia.
Oh, you're the man. It was Ibrahim Jelani, right?
Yeah.
And with all due respect to him, I'm not sure if he was necessarily a better talent than Kipchoge. So to me, I look at that one. This was obviously this lull between Bekele and Farah rising to prominence in 2012. You look at that and you think to yourself, doesn't that seem like just a smash spot for Kipchoge to come in and potentially be a world champion over 10K? Now, as the story goes, he makes this last-ditch effort in 2012 to make the team over 10K and doesn't. And then, that's sort of the end of it. But I just thought to myself, I'm like, why would he not do that? And then once again, like sort of hypothesizing here, the only thing I could possibly think of was that maybe there was a possibility that over 5K, like 12 and a half laps is, it's not super monotonous running for these guys who run a lot, but maybe 25 laps of the track, he just hated the monotony of like going around the track that often. And in the marathon, even though it's 4 times longer at approximately 40K, at least you're not just, lapping a red, red oval 25 times. That's the only reason I can possibly think of why he wouldn't have gone up to the 10K, right?
Yep.
Well, in saying that, he did run 10K. I think he ran like 20, he definitely ran under 27. He ran 26:52 or 56, about that. But he seems like it'd just be a great candidate with his 5,000 meter ability, the fact that he was able to outkick both Bekele and El Garouge in an incredibly fast race. He just seemed like a perfect candidate to run the 10, and yet he just never did. Any other thoughts from your side? Sorry, I went on.
No, it's all good. No more thoughts.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. He never did. I think to summarize that one, just a massive what if, like just a great what if. And it's just such an interesting career from him to go from being such a great 5,000 meter runner, have nothing really competitively over 10K. And then within a couple of years, like I said, 2:05 was his first marathon in Hamburg. Later in that year, that was a spring marathon. Later that year, he ran 2:04:03, which was the marathon you were referencing in Berlin, for second. And then he was just off to the races as the dominant marathon runner, most dominant marathon runner in history for the next 5 or 6 years. Just such a curious and interesting career, unique.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, mate?
Nah.
All right. Nah. Yeah. Should we wrap it up? Plans for Sunday? You've just come back from Tiare.
Oh, I'm really tired. I had to do some hard work this week, so I'm looking forward to having a Sunday as a day of rest.
Sweet. All right. Yeah.
What about yourself?
I might head up to Forest Park, and it's a nice day. I think I'll go up there and.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for. I've been doing some little runs. I bought some of those Nike running shoes in New York.
Which one's the new Vomero?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
And it's getting back to, not to stoke the fire again of the debate of the shoes, but I've got to say they're bloody nice to run in, and your legs definitely feel more. I feel less tired than I used to back in the day. The last time I did any proper running, like early 2000s, it's I'm just jogging along these days very slowly, but it's very nice. They're very nice shoes.
I mentioned earlier, like, obviously my background and professionally and or sort of corporately in the sport as well, on the product side, that was always one of the big pieces of feedback that came out from the early like Nike 4% shoes. And this was at a period of time when Adidas was, like every other brand, was playing catch up. And the number one piece of feedback that would come back from like the athlete agents to our sports marketing team was that all the Nike athletes would go and run the marathons, and then the next morning they could get out of bed and go off and jog before breakfast, and they felt perfectly, and everybody else was basically just hobbling around the hotel because just like the impacts of God knows how many steps you take in a 40 kilometer plus race, right, was just impacting. So that's another interesting little story about the impact of the shoes. Just so much better cushioning, and without the added expense of added weight or loss of ground force. So
nice. They're nice shoes.
Awesome. All right,
very good.
Well, that was a good conversation, man. Awesome. I think we'll do it all again in a week's time.
Awesome.
All right, mate. Have a good weekend, and we'll catch you then.
Cheers, mate.
See ya.